Hi, everyone. Oh, that's loud. Welcome to the Union. We're so glad to have you all today. Just a few house rules. Make sure that you keep your mask on for the entirety of the event, including when you're asking questions. And just a reminder that you can only ask questions if you're sat at the end of the row. I am so excited to introduce Cass Sunstein, Fellow of the British Academy, who's an American legal scholar, particularly in the field of constitutional, administrative, and environmental law and behavioral economics, and the New York Times bestselling author of The World According to Star Wars and Nudge, with a new book, Too Much Information, out. He was the administrator of the White House Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs in the Obama administration from 2009 to 2012. Without any further ado, let's welcome Cass Sunstein.
Great. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be there in the way in which I'm able to be there given technology. So I'm going to talk to you about two things. One is that the government provides or forces people to provide. And the second is about information that the government extracts or forces you to provide. The first is about deluging us with stuff, some of which is important and even essential. Think COVID-19 and saving lives. And the second is deluging us with demands to provide information. Think if you're a student or a visitor or a small business or a ordinary citizen trying to live your life and the government tells you, tell me more. Okay, with respect to the first topic, I have two tales for you, and this is about what people want to know. When I was working in the White House, we had an effort to require restaurants to provide information about the calories in their meals, and this was something I was very excited about. And as part of the team, I was part of a group that was hopeful that we would see our way clear to requiring calorie labels for movie theater offerings, as well as for McDonald's and Subway and regular restaurants. Ultimately, the decision was made. We would indeed have calorie labels for movie theaters. And I sent a note to a good friend saying that this policy had gone the way that I had hoped. And the response I received in my inbox was three words: Cass ruined popcorn. I found that a unsettling, but also deeply interesting response, because when you are in a movie theater and there's a new Star Wars movie or the new movie Tenet, which I recommend, or something from Paris, as you are starting to consume what you've chosen, and the lights go down, you don't want to think to yourself, I'm getting fat. So the idea of ruining popcorn is an entry point into the problems posed by deluging people with information. I have a second story, and it's personal. It involves my father, and a large number of years ago, larger than I wish were the case, he started to stumble on the tennis court, and my mother and I brought him into the hospital for a series of tests. And after the tests, my mother came back, having spoken to the doctor, and said to me and my father in the hospital room, I have great news. The tests all came back negative. You have no problem. You're completely fine. And you'll be out of the hospital tomorrow. They want to keep you here for observation, but basically, you are fine. About half an hour after, my mother took me to the parking lot to drive me back to law school as it happened. And her face changed. And I saw despair on a human face for the first and only time. And she said what I said was not true. The test came back very, very bad. He has a brain tumor. It's quite advanced. There's nothing that can be done. He's going to die within a year, but I'm not going to tell him, and neither are you. My mother made a very interesting judgment there, and I, to this day, don't know whether it was the right judgment. She basically thought telling him this, that he had a fatal disease, was too much information. it would be ruining popcorn in a very serious way. And for his sake, in his remaining months, and for her sake, I think, she didn't want popcorn to be ruined. She wanted the two of them to have some life and joy and normality in as many of the remaining months as they could manage. And that was her judgment. Okay, when I was in the government and worked for governments, I've noticed that information disclosure is sometimes something over which public officials greatly struggle. And one reason they struggle is they lack a satisfactory framework to think about when should information be mandated and when should it not be mandated. You might think about calories or salt or nutrition or things bearing on obesity or genetically modified food used, genetically modified organisms used in food, things about side effects of medicines, things from your bank, things about sunscreen. How much will it do to help you with cancer? And these are issues over which governments have deliberated long and hard. And to try to get some understanding of this, I've now worked in 11 nations to try to get a sense of what humanity thinks about these questions. And it turns out the human species is pretty diverse about information. If you ask people whether they want to know if the person on whom they have a crush, romantic feelings, has romantic feelings back, only a little more than half say yes. Almost half say no. Maybe they think they'll get disappointing news. Maybe they think that they'll get dangerous news. Maybe the answer is yes and they're married. Maybe the answer is no and they're very hopeful. If you ask people whether they want to know whether they're going to get cancer or Alzheimer's, a lot of people say no. You ask people whether they want calorie labels for their meals for the next year, a majority says no. You ask people whether they want to know what commercial actors are doing with their data. About 65% in most countries says yes. That's a strong majority, but a significant minority says no. Okay, having compiled a great deal of data and having a snapshot of human desire to receive information, uh, together with co-authors, I think we have a glimpse of exactly why. When human beings ask for information and when they avoid information, they are thinking about two things. First, is the information useful? People are thinking often, I want to know about something that bears on my health because I can do something about it. I want to know, for example, whether I have a propensity to heart disease because then I can reduce the risk that I'll die of heart disease. I want to know about the potential economic benefits of using energy efficient strategies because I can save money. On the other hand, some information is actually not useful. People won't do anything with it. They don't care. And therefore, they don't want it just because it's worthless to them. Maybe they think, I don't have a weight problem. Calorie labels won't tell me anything I need to know. Or maybe they think that if I'm going to get Alzheimer's disease, that's really sad and it's not useful information. It won't affect me. Sometimes people think, I believe, information would actually be harmful to their lives. It would be the opposite of useful. If they get certain kinds of news, they might act differently. Maybe if they learn something about what other people think of them, they might not be themselves, they might try too hard, or they might into relationships that could be improved. So with respect to usefulness, sometimes people think check mark, yes, very. Sometimes people think X, not useful. And sometimes people think it's worse than that. It's positively destructive to their lives. Okay, that's part of the picture. But there's another part, which is how's the information going to make me feel? In addition to how's the information going to make me act, that's the usefulness question. People ask, is it going to make me happy or sad? I confess that right now, where this won't be a surprise to you, the United States is in the midst of the election, and someone to whom I'm very close is telling me a lot of things that are sometimes upsetting. I don't want to know. Not because it's not useful to know, but because it's upsetting to know. This is ruining popcorn as a category. And when people don't want to know information that bears on their economic situation or their health, it's because it's going to make them sad. And that is part of the informal calculation that people make when they decide whether to seek or avoid information. They weight usefulness and feelings. And if the feelings are very negative and the usefulness is small, they'll think, don't tell me. If the usefulness is very high and the feelings are neutral, they'll say, absolutely, I want to know. Hard cases are those in which there's high usefulness and high negative feelings, then people are going to give different ways. And the diversity in the data I kind of sketched for you is a product of that. Okay, what can we do with this information we have? I suggest we can do a lot. If we are acting for an institution, it could be a university or it could be government officials thinking about COVID-19 or thinking about food safety or thinking about occupational safety or thinking about driver safety. We can think hard about whether information actually is useful to people and about how information makes them feel. If it's information that is useful, but it's going to make them feel really bad, it might be on balance a good idea to make sure people get the information because they might save their lives. But if it makes them feel bad, there's a risk that they'll ignore it and block their ears and try to forget it, which suggests some clues about how to ensure that information disclosure is useful and not so inductive of despair or fear that people tune it out. In the context of COVID-19, some nations that have done very well, including New Zealand, have been quite attuned to this. They've made sure information is useful and that it is, if it induces a measure of fear or sadness, it's not so dispiriting that it makes people think, why bother? Why try? And if we have a little framework of this sort in mind, we can think better, I believe, not only about when to require information to be disclosed from a bank or a restaurant or a hotel, but also how to ensure that information is disclosed. So it's actually, on balance, helpful to people. The heavy artillery here is so Bentham is the secret hero of these remarks, where we ought to be focusing very determinedly on the human consequences of information, which is not to say that we should withhold it when it's in people's interest or it's people's rights to get it. But we should think very carefully about whether information disclosure is making people's lives better or not. And if you're a doctor or a public official, that is a helpful orienting principle to keep in mind. Okay, I'm done with the first part about too much information as a effort of a bank or a car company to throw stuff in your face. Now I'm going to talk briefly about the problem of sludge, which is the term for the government demanding information from us. And to get a hold of the problem of sludge, I'm going to give you a number. The number is 11 billion. And if you remember anything from these remarks, I hope it's the number 11 billion. That's the number of hours in paperwork burdens that the United States government imposes on the American people. I don't know the number that the United Kingdom's government imposes on its citizens, nor the number that Germany imposes on its citizens, nor the number Ireland imposes on its citizens. But I'm confident that whatever number it is, it's much higher than it ought to be. The numbers that we're now exploring, of which 11 billion is the prize winner, are hours that people spend trying to get, let's say, economic help in a very challenging time. Or they are hours that people spend trying to get access to educational opportunity. or they are hours that people spend trying to get a permit, which is essential maybe for them to do something which the government hopes they will do because it will turn their lives around. Or they are hours that people have to spend to get access to something in order to have a license to engage in activity that can turn their lives around. Whether you are a small company, a large company, a student, a teacher, a nurse, a doctor, an engineer, an architect, a lawyer, or a lawyer's assistant, someone dealing with the criminal justice system, sludge is often a wall that is standing between you and something very important. Now, the challenge of the wall is not just that it takes time to find a way to get over it, but also that it often is insuperable. You can't get over it. And that means that essential benefits, opportunities are missing from people, not because of anything good, but because of waiting time, because of administrative burdens, because of paperwork requirements that are too challenging. Many students who'd like to come to the United States can't because of sludge. Many poor people who are eligible for benefits that could help their children and themselves escape poverty fail because of sludge. We're seeing voting sludge in the United States. The United Kingdom has sludge with respect to 1,001 different things. What we need are sludge audits by which the government audits the amount of sludge it is imposing, and audits here as elsewhere can organize the mind. They often reveal that the number is far higher than anyone wants it to be. And that organization of the mind can create concentration of the mind, which can create aggressive sludge reduction efforts. We've observed this in many parts of the world in the context of the pandemic, where unwanted sludge emerges as life impairing sludge. That is, with respect to health and economic benefit, et cetera, something that is a wall between people and a doctor or a wall between people and money becomes a scandal. And very quietly, public officials, people in the private sector have been taking the brick out of the wall that is sludge in a way that has been extremely valuable and in some cases life-saving. But sludge reduction, the problem of taking away too much information as demanded by large institutions, shouldn't be only a pandemic-driven enterprise. It should be something that occurs basically every month. Okay, I'm basically done. I want to suggest that what unifies the first set of claims about too much information that we are thrown, that's thrown in our faces, and too much information that's extracted from our busy hands, is unified by an answer to a single question, which is, what's the most precious thing that human beings have? What is the one thing that we are most blessed to have? And yes, it is a four-letter word, time. Let's by all means, might we, find a way to give people more of it. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So my first question about information is, you spoke a lot about how governments can resolve themselves of sludge and decide when to give out information. Is there anything that individuals can do to change the information that they receive or put pressure on the government to do these actions?
Yes, great, thank you. So my main government mandating disclosure of information, that is telling banks they have to tell you stuff and telling hospitals they have to tell you things. And there's a lot of mandatory disclosure that is great, but there's a lot that involves, 40 pages of things that nobody can understand, or things about side effects of a medication that basically scare people and don't help them. So there's that. If the government's withholding information that it has, I hope all of us get nervous about that. So for the government, not that the government should tell us everything if there's a national security issue or if it knows something about your neighbor that's private, by all means, there's a sufficient justification, at least potentially, not to disclose. But be nervous about the government withholding information. That's uh, not very productive of democracy. For each of us in our lives, I think to focus in a way that's a little more self-conscious than we sometimes do about what information is too much information. So if you're scrolling on Twitter between, 10 at night and at midnight and learning a lot about something that's just upsetting you and not helping you know anything that's useful, it's a little bit like an addiction. Maybe stop. Am I speaking autobiographically? Yes. To be conscious of our own information diet is a really good idea. And some people need to go on a different diet, meaning, more things that are nutritious and fewer things that are just alarming. And to be conscious about whether what you're getting is making your life better. Where better isn't limited to, is it making you smile more? Uh, that is important. That's not everything. Sad news or distressing news often enriches a life. But to be as conscious about information diet as many people are about food intake.
Yeah, so on the topic of information diets and Twitter, how do you think we can deal with the problem where people think their information diet is great, but they're only getting it from one source and they want to avoid other sources of information? Are there ways that large companies can address this? Are there ways individuals can address this? Will it ever change?
Uh, Great. So there's the echo chamber problem. And if you look at Facebook, where there's more kind of data out there, Facebook has had two issues that bear on democracy. One is about echo chambers, and one is about misinformation. And interestingly, they've tackled the misinformation problem in the last, 9 months or maybe a little more. Not perfectly, but they have tackled it in some ways that I view are productive improvements. But they haven't really tackled the echo chamber problem, and that's too bad. So for Facebook to think hard about its news feeds algorithm in a way that doesn't ensure that people hear louder and louder echoes of their own voice would be in the social interest all over. There are apps and such that make movements in the direction. There's an app called Read Across the Aisle, which can tell you what your information diet is looking like, and if it's skewed ideologically, it just uses information as a check on whether you're seeing multiple points of view or only one. And Facebook and Twitter could be much better at empowering people to have clarity on what it is they're seeing. Now, these are, not the truth police or the police, but for them to be thinking about whether their users are even inadvertently creating a kind of echo chamber, that would be a really good idea. And for each of us to be thinking about that would also be a very good thing.
And then on the topic of misinformation, I guess there's a case to be made that some misinformation can make people happier. How would misinformation fit in your enriching people's lives standard of information?
So if I heard that my favorite sports teams were, their success over the last week has been phenomenal, and that was not true, at least at the moment where I heard it, of course, it would make me very happy. Um, okay, so disinformation that is making people smile, um, there should be either for, Kantian reasons about treating or utilitarian reasons about things biting back. A uh, vehicles by which disinformation gets corrected. Now, it might be that the right vehicle on Twitter would be some sort of label or warning, and Facebook has, in some contexts, been pretty insistent about correcting falsehood. I have a noisy Labrador Retriever who I think is very enthusiastic about disinformation. So she's being a little, uh, uh, she's disinforming me by her whining. So I'm attending to her with my left hand. Is that too much information for you? I bet it is. Thanks for your indulgence. So the problem of disinformation is one that institutions should try to respond to, I think. Not by censoring. You don't want Twitter or Facebook oddly to be censoring things. If someone says the moon is made out of green cheese, or that my Labrador Retriever is not just ill-behaved right now, but generally ill-behaved, that's false. We don't want that censored. But to have labels for sometimes more aggressive stuff for things that involve health and safety or things that involve politics, that's probably a good idea. Notice we're now speaking about private entities, not about the government. So we're not talking about the kinds of strictures that are properly and uniquely applicable to public officials who are trying to get rid of speech.
Yeah, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the election coming up in just 4 days now, I think. You've spoken at length about preference falsification, so the idea that people might be afraid to express their true beliefs unless they feel like they're agreed with. And Trump has definitely taken that idea with like the silent majority. Do you think this might explain how Trump won the 2016 election? Will something similar happen on Tuesday?
Okay, thank you for that. So let's talk a little bit about preference falsification. All of us have in our head some beliefs and values that we express either to no one or only to people who are our most intimate friends. So it may be that you have a conviction about some political issue that is out of step with most people you know, and you don't tell anyone about that. Maybe you tell your best friend. Or it may be that you've been subjected to something bad, maybe sexual harassment, maybe discrimination on some ground, and you don't talk about it, it's private, and you think it might be stigmatizing. Or maybe you think that Brexit was a great idea or Brexit was a terrible idea, and you're in your community, that's not really something that is right thinking people think, so you don't say it. And this is a clue to why social change often happens and why it's so hard to anticipate. Brexit, I speak with humility here as an American, but Brexit seems to have succeeded in part because people have been formally silent about their concerns about Brussels, et cetera, felt they had a green light. And hashtag Me Too and hashtag Black Lives Matters has a lot to do with that, where people felt licensed to say what they experienced or what they think. And the same is true of the fall of communism. That had a lot to do with that. And I think you're quite right that President Trump's surprising election in 2016, enough people thought, I kind of like this guy, and I'm mad in ways that overlap with his madness. I won't tell the pollsters even that, and I'm certainly not going to, be very public about it. But when I get to the ballot, I'm marking down Trump and not Clinton. And we have evidence to think that that was part of the picture. It might be true now also. It's less likely to be true now because his very success in 2016 has broadly reduced the stigma that was attached to supporting him back then. He's president after all. And we do have some nice data suggesting that uh, if people are focusing on the fact that Trump is president, they're more willing to be anti-immigrant, kind of xenophobic, in a way that becomes publicly knowable. That is, that the very success of Trump, once it's clearly in people's heads, makes people less likely to preference falsify with respect to things that relate to President Trump, which is a very long way of saying that it's not very predictable what's going to happen on Tuesday, but I'm doubtful that preference falsification will play as large a role as it did in 2016.
All right. Um, no matter what happens, there's going to be coverage everywhere about what this model got wrong, what this theory got right, et cetera, et cetera. What is your prediction and why?
Okay, so I think it is right now at least 60% likely that Biden will win by Friday. So we may not know on November 3rd, but it's 60% or higher likely that he'll win by Friday. Now, keep in mind that means that 40% or lower, but not lower than 20%, I believe, likely that Trump will win by Friday or after. Uh, so this is not a prediction, this is a statement of probability. And the reason I think that is that the polls right now are very favorable to Biden, and they're trending in his direction, meaning that the trend things are all staying steady state, which is good for him because they're currently favorable, or they're actually trending in his direction, which is even better for him. So given that Trump is behind in various places, he needs to do very well, basically, the next few days to catch up. And there's no indication he's doing that. So, as I say, there's a significant chance that things will turn his way. But as as between the two, Biden is in a significantly stronger position. And this is just based on a large number of data points, none of which points in a contrary direction to what I just said.
And do you think there's going to be a wide social change if Biden wins? Is how do you think America's going to react?
What a great question. One of the things that we've all learned through observation, I think social science in the last 15 years or so has driven nicely home, nicely meaning, made very concrete, is that there's a lot of unpredictability in social developments, partly because uh, we can often have cascades of action, which smaller serendipitous factors can inaugurate, which is a way of saying that if Biden's elected, what exactly is going to happen is not predictable. Two things are highly likely. One is that there will be a lowering of the temperature internally and a kind of restoration of America's international role and self-understanding that will happen relatively quickly, combined with not everywhere, but in a lot of places, a feeling of relief uh, and something like exhilaration. So the idea that Biden has promised to rejoin the World Health Organization, to rejoin the Paris Agreement. Technically, we're not out of those yet, but President Trump has indicated his intention to get out. So that those would be markers of rejoining. Biden knows many of the world's leaders. He's a very genial person and an amazing listener. I know him well personally. He's an extremely likable, kind, um, uh, uh, respectful human being. That's just how he is. And so a path internationally would have uh, a great deal of smiling and calming, I think is highly likely. Domestically, that I think that is very possible also. He isn't a polarizing figure. He's someone who works well with people who disagree with him. So he could have a kind of unifying uh, um, uh, uh, effect, at least in the short term. So that's one path. Another possible path, domestically now I'm speaking, I think the international relief and something like exhilaration is highly likely. Not everywhere, but in general. The domestic possibility is that President Trump supporters and some people on the right will be extremely enraged and feel very much at risk and seek to delegitimate a Biden presidency. That is a possible path. And that would be something challenging for the nation to manage. Something like it did happen under President Obama, and I worked for him, so I saw it close up from Washington. It was bad, but it wasn't devastatingly bad. That is, the effort to delegitimate President Obama was not sufficiently strong as to, tear the country apart.
So, my last election related question is about the role of information in elections. Do you think that voters now in 2020, under lockdown or under tons and tons of coronavirus rules, are they operating under less information, more information, a different type of information than they have been in previous elections? And how do you think that may shape how they're going to vote?
Yeah, I'm telling you, one of my heroes is Daniel Kahneman, the psychologist who was in an interview not long ago in response to a series of good questions, kept saying, I don't know. And the interviewer was frustrated with him and finally said, why are you always answering, I don't know? And he said, it's an empirical question, and I don't have the data. So I actually made up a bumper sticker for my car that says it's an empirical question and I don't have the data. I haven't put it on my car because I think I'd probably get arrested. I think some police officer would, what's he saying with that? That sounds a little bit illegal or provocative. So I haven't put it on my car, but I did put it on my office door in the days when I used to go in my office. So this is a way of saying whether people have more information or less information. I don't know. It's an empirical question. I don't have the data. But unlike Kahneman, I will speculate that because of the uh, pandemic and because of the division politically, must be a little like Brexit was in the UK. There's a hunger for information so that people are thinking that citizenship has a kind of nobility and centrality that in most elections, that's not as widespread or intense. So my speculation, notwithstanding my bumper sticker, is that it's a very informed electorate, though also in certain places it's a misinformed electorate where the hunger is produced knowledge that isn't exactly true.
All right, I'm going to move on to how nudge theory has informed coronavirus responses. So many governmental responses to coronavirus, besides lockdowns, have reinforced a significant public messaging component. How scientific do you think those were, and how do you think nudge theory could have influenced these governments to create better responses?
Okay, so I should say that I'm now heading an advisory group at the World Health Organization on behavioral science and public health. And part of our job is to explore COVID-19 and what might be done to help. And so at the World Health Organization, which is, playing a significant role in the combating the pandemic, there's a great deal of expertise about behavioral science and nudging, and there's a unit there of people whose job it is to know about this stuff, and the group which I'm chairing is advising them. I'd say what the idea of seeing nudges in communication as coextensive isn't quite right. That if, for example, you're trying to get people to get a flu vaccine, in circumstances, let's just stipulate the vaccine works, doesn't cause side effects, it's a good thing to do. Let's just stipulate that. The behavioral science list of things to do would have on it toward the top. Make it convenient and easy. Make it so that people can find the vaccine, that they can go to the place where there is the vaccine, that they can have a good experience, and that it doesn't take terribly long. That's not communication, it's about convenience. Just as if you want people to enroll in a pension plan, the most effective nudge is automatically enroll them. Allow them to opt out if they don't want to, but make them do nothing if they, if we have clarity that it's a good thing for people, don't make them bother. Let them opt out if they choose otherwise. That would be a nudge. So in communication, the idea would be to use something like the behavioral insight team in the UK's framework, which is called the EAST framework, easy, attractive, social, and timely. And each of those letters has a volume of research behind it. But if there's a communication that is timely, so people see it when they're about to enter, let's say, a store, if they see it as they're going to sleep, that's good. Make it timely. If it's social, if they get clarity that this is what people are generally doing, like wearing masks, and let's stipulate that that's true. To make it social is a really good thing. To make it attractive, meaning mask wearing, not as if it's going to make you look like a movie star, but it's not going to make you feel ashamed of yourself. That's a positive. And in New Zealand, which has been extremely effective with respect to COVID-19, the Prime Minister and the government, which has a lot of behavioral expertise, has been, with respect to everything that I've been able to study, has been brilliant in terms of nudging in behavioral science. So they've given people a sense of hope. They've given people a sense of this is social. They've given a sense of it's attractive. One of their slogans is be kind. And the notion of be kind, people want to be kind and they want to be treated kindly. So to have that, connect that with mask wearing, that's a really good idea. And to say, as the Prime Minister has said, we're a team of 5 million, that's the S in the EAST framework to make it social. So there's been a kind of behavioral genius in New Zealand with respect to COVID-19 communication, and it's worked.
All right. My last long question was submitted to me by someone who sadly couldn't make it tonight. In Nudge, you've said, quote, Republicans just want to make people's lives better. Do you still believe that to be true, looking at the current Republican Party and their actions in the last few weeks, months, or years?
Gosh, I don't remember that quote. It doesn't sound like something I would have written, just it points with such a broad brush. To say Democrats just want people's lives better, Republicans that would be, a generalization that I would not be excited to have expressed. I think when I was in Washington, I worked very well with Republican politicians, and behind closed doors, certainly, I liked them, uh, every single one in front of an audience. Sometimes they get carried away. I think it's good to be charitable and not extremely excited about some things that have happened in American politics, some of the cruelty and harshness and ugliness, certainly there. I've been disappointed by many members of the Republican Party and their uh, failure, let's say, to comport with the better angels of their nature. But charity is a good virtue, and uh, just as to say everyone wants what's good, that would be probably naively charitable. To say that we give everyone the benefit of the doubt is probably a good way to live one's life.
All right, now I'm just going to ask a few rapid fire questions. So, what is the craziest political theory that you've heard?
Marxism,
Do you think the Senate will flip?
yes,
Would you specifically want to know how many calories are in your food?
not always, maybe about half the time.
All right, with that, I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience. Reminder to keep your mask on and keep your hand raised until one of our stewards can get to you. All right, the guy in the black.
Hi, I wanted to ask the problem of the echo chamber, and for example, Facebook having the problem of an echo chamber in terms of how it works and the algorithm works. If it's in Facebook's interest to not have the reaction that you describe, which is to not want to hear the information of your ears, and instead deliver people an echo of their own voice, because it's profitable for them to be on platform, how does that problem?
Yeah, so I heard that, I think, which is that it might be in Facebook's interest to create echo chambers on the ground that that creates more engagement. So if you, for example, are really interested in Star Wars, then if they throw things at you from Star Trek, you might think, I don't want to go on this platform anymore. I want Star Wars, not Star Trek. So that is a constraint. The question is whether experimentation with the algorithm that reduces, let's say, the echo chamber effect would have a significant negative effect on profits or engagement. And I'm hopeful that it wouldn't, that a lot of people are curious and that if they see things that are well presented or lively, that are different from what they think, um, they won't say, okay, I'm going to go to Instagram now. Or if they go to Instagram now, that won't be why.
The other question I was going to ask is, although it's perhaps questionable and the Republicans said that the Democrats shouldn't do it, there is now a huge imbalance in the Supreme Court in terms of conservative liberal leaning. And I was wondering if there's a way which isn't just to introduce another Supreme Court justice, that if Biden became president, he could address that issue for people who don't want abortion to become illegal again, or other such issues, social issues, and whether you just had any views on that. Because to introduce one would surely be quite divisive and perhaps.
Okay, good. So just the pattern of appointments in recent years is consistent with the following proposition. A Democratic president will appoint justices who are unlikely to want to overrule Roe against Wade and to allow states to criminalize abortion. So if we look at the appointments of President Clinton and President Obama, I don't think any of them wanted to overrule Roe against Wade and to allow states to criminalize abortion. Now, that's not because Obama or Clinton said, I'll appoint you if and only if you agree to support the Roe against Wade decision. It's more that the kind of person that a Democratic president would appoint would either be respectful of stare decisis or be respectful of women's right to choose, something like that. So I think there's every reason to expect that a Biden choice for the Supreme Court would be disinclined to go to overrule Roe against Wade. That sounds accurate. Challenge for President Biden, if that's what we end up having, is that there will be 6 quite conservative members of the Supreme Court, and it's possible that 5 or 6 of them will want to overrule Roe against Wade in the fullness of time. This is not predictable, but it's possible. And if Biden gets to replace, let's say, 1 or 2 people, it may be that there are 5 or 6 going the wrong way by his lights. And then the question is, what does he do? And there are 2 options here with respect to abortion. One is to expand the size of the Supreme Court, and he has said that he would like a commission to think this through. And another possibility is to support legislation from the legislature that would protect the right to choose. And Biden has said he would support that. So I think to expect engagement on both issues, that is legislation and the composition of the Supreme Court, is a good idea if he's elected. Now, what would happen with those questions? No crystal ball here. No doubt the question whether abortion will be a crime in the United States is a fair question now, and it has not been a fair question until recently.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Sunstein, for coming to speak with us. We all really enjoyed it. Just to remind you all of our upcoming events, on Monday, we have Rainn Wilson. You might know him as Dwight Schrute. On Wednesday, we have our class panel. And on Thursday, we have our comedy debate on the motion, "This House would reenact the gunpowder plot." In terms of seat dismissal, we're going to do it sort of primary school style. So that side is going to go out the fire escape doors, and then this side is going to come round that way. So I'll just dismiss you row by row, starting from the back, and then you all can start from the back as well. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much, Cass Sunstein.